So, guys, after the first week of Commanders training camp, one thing has become pretty clear. This team already looks completely different from the one we watched last season. Ever since training camp began, we've seen the defense consistently setting up the tone, while the offense has gradually improved as it adjusts to the new system. On top of that, the new coaching staff has already made a noticeable impact, giving fans plenty of reasons to believe this team could take a big step forward this season. But despite all the positives we've seen so far, not everything was perfect. Week 1 also exposed a few major concerns that could become serious problems. So let me break down the 3 biggest issues that are still holding this team back after Week 1 training camp, why they matter, and whether the Commanders have enough time to solve them before Week 1. What's up, Commanders Nation? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Commanders. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Alright, let's get right into it because there is actual breaking news that just came in and it connects directly to problem number 1, the center position. Washington just went out and signed Trey Hill after Nick Allegretti suffered a calf strain during the first week of camp. Now, before you panic, let me explain what this really means, because a lot of fans are going to see a new name pop up and immediately assume the worst. Trey Hill doesn't have a ton of starting experience in the NFL, but he does come from a similar offensive system back when he was with the Bears. So he already understands some of these concepts and shouldn't need a long runway to get comfortable. That familiarity is exactly why Washington brought him in on short notice. But here's the important part, guys, and I need you to really hear this. This signing is not about replacing Nick Allegretti. He's still projected to be back within a week, and he remains the clear starter at center once he's healthy. So, what is Trey Hill actually here for? He's here to compete with Julian Good-Jones and Matt Gulbin for a backup role or a practice squad spot. Nothing more dramatic than that. Basically, Washington just added competition and depth at one of the thinnest spots on this roster, and honestly, that's a smart, low-risk move no matter how you look at it. It's the kind of transaction that doesn't make headlines for long, but it's exactly the type of depth move that saves a season when injuries pile up in October and November. But look, even with this move, the center situation is still my biggest concern heading into the season. I already had my doubts about Nick Allegretti before any of this happened, and I know I wasn't the only one. Honestly, it wasn't just a me thing. Everybody watching this offensive line was already a little uneasy about that spot. Now he's dealing with a calf issue, and even though the team says he'll be good to go soon, injuries like that can linger longer than people expect, especially once the pads come on and the real hitting starts in the joint practices. And if he goes down again, or if he's just not fully right when the season starts, Julian Good-Jones simply cannot be the guy at center against a real NFL front seven. I like Matt Gulbin as a draft pick. I think the kid has genuine potential and some real upside long term, but I don't want to see him thrown into a starting job in week 1 either. That's just too much too soon for a rookie, especially at a position that requires making protection calls on the fly. So if it comes down to Good-Jones or Gulbin, I'd rather see Gulbin get the reps and let him learn on the job, but that's still a tough ask for a young player. And here's why this matters so much for this offense specifically. If this passing game is going to be explosive this year, it has to be built off the running game first. That's just how modern offenses generate these chunk plays down the field. A big reason Tyler Biadasz isn't with this team anymore is because he kept getting pushed back in the run game and couldn't consistently move bodies at the point of attack. And from what I saw in limited camp reps, that same push isn't fully there yet on the interior of this offensive line, even accounting for the fact that the defensive line wasn't wearing pads. So yeah, the center spot, even with the Trey Hill signing giving us some peace of mind on depth, is still concern number 1 for me heading into the season. Now let's talk about concern number 2, and this one is simple, but it might honestly be the most nerve-wracking of the 3, kicking. Drew Stevens was the first kicker of a practice, which usually tells you he's currently on top of the depth chart heading into the summer. But then something happened the moment fans actually showed up to watch. He started missing kicks, especially once they ran that fire drill field goal period where they added some real pressure and simulated crowd noise into the mix. Look, I get it, practice is practice, and it's easy to say these things don't carry over into real games where the stakes are actually there. But I've watched this team enough times to know that kicking has burned Washington in actual games plenty of times over the last few seasons, and it's not like this is some brand new issue popping up out of nowhere. So I need to see more than a shaky camp performance before I feel any real comfort here. I need to see consistency once the lights come on in September. This is the kind of position where one missed kick in December in a cold weather game with the season on the line can completely change how a whole year is remembered. So it's not something I'm willing to just brush off because it's only camp and the pads aren't fully on yet. And then, concern number 3, and this one is more about depth than raw talent, wide receiver 2. We've talked about this basically all offseason, this idea of using a committee approach at that spot instead of relying on one true number 2 guy to carry that role by himself. I've mentioned Antonio Williams stepping into that role. I've mentioned Luke McCaffrey as another piece of that puzzle, and through the first few days of camp, that receiver room genuinely struggled to separate from coverage, especially while working in the red zone where the field gets condensed and windows get tight. But then something shifted, and honestly, it happened faster than I expected. Once they got out of those red zone drills and back to full field work, all of a sudden guys started getting open on a consistent basis. Receivers were winning off the line, creating real space between the 20-yard lines, and it looked a lot more promising than it did just a couple days earlier. So between the 20s, I actually feel pretty good about this group and where it's trending. My concern is strictly in the red zone and near the goal line, where a true number 2 receiver with size and body control would really show up and make a real difference on 3rd and 4th down situations. That's exactly why keeping an eye on someone like Stefan Diggs this week matters so much for this offense. And here's the thing, guys, this isn't even some long shot scenario anymore. The latest reports actually have Washington as the clear front runner to land him, well ahead of any other team in the mix. Adding a guy like that would completely change the ceiling of this passing attack near the goal line, turning a good red zone offense into a genuinely dangerous one. Now, with all 3 of those concerns out on the table, I want to be fair here because it's not all doom and gloom. Honestly, it's far from it. The defense through camp has looked like a completely different unit than what we've seen from this franchise in a long, long time. Odafe Oweh has been the story of camp, and rightfully so, guys. I keep bringing him up because he keeps giving me reasons to. This guy was already playing like a top 12 edge rusher last season without even getting a full workload behind other pass rushers, and now he's out there beating Laramie Tunsil in one-on-one reps, who, by the way, I still think is one of the best left tackles in this entire league, so that tells you everything about where his game is right now. On the other side, K'Lavon Chaisson has flashed as well, showing real burst off the edge. And behind those two, you've got size and range all over this defense with guys like Sonny Styles and Nick Cross who can both run and hit. This defense is not sitting in one scheme all day either. One play, it's a double mug look on 1st down. Next play, it's some split field coverage with a safety dropping in and an edge guy bailing into space in a way you just don't normally see. There is no clear tendency to key on from an opposing quarterback's perspective, and that's exactly what makes this group so dangerous heading into the season. Offensively, the identity is shifting too, and honestly, it's shifting in a really encouraging direction. We're still going to see shotgun snaps, don't worry about that, going away completely. This coaching staff isn't throwing out everything that worked before. But the under-center work and the play-action shots off of it are finally showing up the way we hoped they would when this whole transition started. There's real value in using horizontal motion across the formation to set up those explosive vertical shots downfield, giving guys a chance to catch the ball in space and turn a short throw into a long gain. And that motion piece has genuinely been all over camp so far. Jayden Daniels struggled a bit early in the week, which honestly makes sense given how much new stuff is being installed all at once and how many new checks he has to learn, but by the 3rd and 4th day, he looked noticeably sharper and more comfortable running these new concepts, which is exactly the kind of progression you want to see out of camp. So, here's where I land on all of this. The ceiling for this team is genuinely higher than it's been in a long time, and I believe that since free agency happened, so don't come at me saying I'm overreacting to 1 week of camp. But belief in the ceiling doesn't erase these 3 concerns. Center depth behind Nick Allegretti, even with Trey Hill now in the building. The kicking situation with Drew Stevens struggling once real pressure showed up. And wide receiver 2 truly coming through in the red zone, which is exactly why the Stefan Diggs situation is one to watch closely this week. If Washington can find answers to even 2 of these 3 problems before week 1, I think this team takes a real step forward from where they were last season. And that ceiling we've been talking about all offseason actually becomes reachable instead of just theoretical. If all 3 linger into the regular season, though, they could be the difference between a real playoff run and a frustrating year that never quite lives up to what we saw flashing on the practice field back in August. That's honestly how thin the margins are at this level. One shaky position group can undo months of good work everywhere else.